All right, welcome to our study. This is the School of Evangelism, the Gospel of Christ. This is session 7, and this is we're going to be covering leading up to the gospel presentation. Before we do, what I want to do, and this is not in your notes, will be in your notes in just a moment, but I want to deal with a couple of misconceptions before we actually get into how you make a presentation of the gospel. In this year, in 2021, the Pew Research poll was taken, and 65% of Christians said that they thought that it was better to share your faith by the way you live rather than to speak about it. There is a little bit of a problem with that. I want to just talk about that for a moment, because no matter how honest you may be, no matter how much you may try to live right, no matter how hardworking you may be or whatever else, most people probably do not associate that with your faith unless you've already been talking about your faith. Otherwise, they just think you're just kind of an honest, hard-working person. The second thing is, no amount of good living is really going to effectively communicate the gospel, and we need to understand that. Look, just because someone really tries to live a good life does not mean that the people around them understand that they are under sin, or they understand that they cannot save themselves. Those actions do not produce a mindset in those folks that tells them that God is going to judge sin, or that they are guilty without excuse, or that God has made a provision for their sin through His Son, and that faith in the finished work of Christ is the only way to avoid God's wrath and the penalty of sin. They won't understand any of those things. Barb?
You've mentioned a number of times, there are a lot of people out there who do good things and don't believe in God, don't believe in the Gospels.
Exactly.
So just living a good life doesn't really show your faith.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. So that I'm just trying to kind of point that out, because I know it sounds good to say I just want to live in such a way that people will see my life and it'll have meaning. But what they need to know in order to be saved will not be communicated through that. And so if we really want folks to be saved, we are going to have to talk about it. So I just go back to that number again, because I thought that was a high number. 65% of Christians thought that was the way to do it. And I don't think they could be more wrong. Maybe they think that, and this may have been in your head as I was talking about that. I don't know if you realize it, but 69% of all churchgoers, this is no one denomination, 69% of all churchgoers think everyone is going to heaven. Now take that number and combine it with 20% of evangelicals do not even believe there is a heaven. You know what that leaves? A very small portion of people who, A, do not think everybody's automatically going, and number two, who actually do believe in heaven. So anyway, things have really turned around as far as what people believe and how all of that is, what people's understanding of the Bible is. My point is to say, if we don't know how to articulate the gospel, if we can't really give a clear plan of salvation to someone, the likelihood is that folks are just going to hell. And so we want to make a change in that. Let me give you a verse, because it's not just my opinion here, but actually Paul writes about this issue in Romans chapter 10. And so here it is. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? So when you get to Romans 10, Paul kind of understands that process. You got to have a preacher that's willing to say it. That way people can hear it, And only when they hear it can they believe. So you notice that Paul doesn't come along and answer those questions. How shall they call on him whom they have not believed? How shall they believe him that have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? He doesn't come along and answer those by saying, just live a good life. No, he's talking about somebody has to actually say it. And that means that we're called to be faithful ambassadors. So let's just get this concept down for a moment. To be a faithful ambassador is directly connected with our ability to give the gospel and to faithfully do so. 2 verses real quickly on that. 2 Corinthians 5:18. And all things are of God, who hath reconciled us to himself by Jesus Christ, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God did beseech you by us. We pray you in Christ's stead, be ye reconciled to God. So you see how our ambassadorship is connected with that ministry of reconciliation. One more, this is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 19. And for me, that utterance may be, this is a prayer that Paul is asking for them to pray for him. And he says, for me, that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. You see how Paul is connecting up him boldly speaking the gospel with being an ambassador. And so if we're going to be faithful ambassadors, we need to be able to do that same thing as well. Now, one last thing on this, because you may have been thinking, but wait, Brother Mike, what about Matthew 5:16? What about that? Well, let's go look at that. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And they say, see there? They'll see their good works. And that's just what we're talking about. There's a couple of things wrong with it. By the way, that's not in your book. I'm still in my comments. Okay, I saw y'all looking around. So when you see Matthew 5:16, what do you automatically know about that? Yeah, that's not our apostle writing to us as members of the body of Christ. That is being written to whom? That's written to the members of the little flock, the believing remnant of Israel. That's who that's written to. And so, by the way, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is a discourse that we refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus was up there on the Mount of Olives, and he's talking to two groups of people, actually. He's talking to those that believe in him and are following him. And then there's some others that are just Israelites that are curious. They've come to hear what he has to say, and now he's speaking to them just as Israelites. And that happens a couple of times, as a matter of fact. In fact, sometimes it got a little confusing about who he was. All of a sudden, did he switch gears, and who is he talking to? And Peter says a couple of times in the scripture, are you talking to us, or are you talking to them? You know, are you talking to your disciples, or are you talking to the whole bunch? Well, anyway, I don't want to get off on that except to say, let me just say that in the Sermon on the Mount, that sermon is broken up into 5 parts. Matthew 5:16 is the second part. And so what you've got here in this section is the Lord is dealing with a lot of erroneous things that have been taught in Israel, and he is straightening them out and asking the little flock to conduct themselves in accordance with what he is going to tell them here. So this is corrective doctrine. And the meaning of verse 16 is this. And this is why it's different. Because you have to understand what it would be as a Gentile. That's during Israel's program. And what was the means by which any Gentiles were ever going to get affected? Well, first of all, in order for them to get in, so to speak, they had to believe that Israel's God was the only true and living God. Israel was under the law. But if they kept that law, what did they get? They got rewarded. They got blessings. And so he says, you know what? Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So when he's talking about that, he's actually saying, let them see my blessing on you because you have kept that which I have given you to keep. And so that was the impact that they were supposed to make on the Gentile nations. Look, just for a moment, just think about this. Back in that time, even back in the Old Testament time, the job of Israel was to experience the blessing of God as a testimony to all those Gentiles, so that they would see that. As a matter of fact, in Deuteronomy, God said, if you do this, there's something that's going to happen, and these Gentiles are going to say something. Let me show it to you in Deuteronomy chapter 4. He says in verse 5, behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding, where? In the sight of the nations. He says, keep these statutes and commandments. This is your wisdom and understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath God so nigh unto them, so near unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great, that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? See, that was the impact that the Gentiles were supposed to be impacted with. As a matter of fact, when you came in, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but when you see the lay of the land here, Sea of Galilee, here's the Jordan coming down here's the Dead Sea and all this stuff, and Jerusalem sits right here. There was actually some trade routes, major trade routes that came up, and one came up this way, and it did this, and it crossed over, and it kind of branched out and up here, and then it branched out this way, and then it went this way. And right here, as you came into Jerusalem, right here, what they did, if you go back and look back in the Old Testament scriptures, as you were coming in this trade, because if you're going to Egypt, this is the way you came. If you're leaving Egypt and you're going north, this is the way you went. And what they did is God had them take these huge, huge stones. Think of them as billboards. And what they did is they wrote the law on these huge stones that were set up. And as people came into Israel, they'd be looking at this, and written there would be the law of God. They were supposed to see that and go, wow, instead of eat at Joe's, it was, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul. So that was supposed to make an impact on them that, boy, these people are serious about their God. And so they put these big things up for everyone to see. What God meant for them to have was his blessing, so that when the rest of the world was under the sufferings of, you realize what those blessings were when they kept the law, was they were no longer under the sufferings of this present time. They were not affected by the lack of rain and crop failure. They were no longer affected by disease rotting the fruit trees so that they didn't produce. They were no longer affected by their cattle not having calves and their herds increasing. They did, all of those things got reversed for them under the blessing of God. And God meant for them to show those good works so that his blessing would pour upon them, so Gentiles would look and go, man, we want that kind of God. Because what kind of God did the Gentiles have? They had the ones that didn't even exist. So what did they do? They prayed for rain. Remember the prophets of Baal? When they're going to make a sacrifice? And you're going to ask God, let's let the God that answers by fire be God. Remember that? And what are they doing? They're scurrying around all day and cutting themselves and crying out to God and doing all kinds of stuff. That's typical Gentile. When they could see the real thing, that was supposed to make an impact. That's what Matthew 5:16 is about. Making that men shall see your good works and glorify God. That was what that was supposed to be. And by the way, they weren't getting the message of the death, burial, and resurrection. The message was Israel's God is the true and living God. And it becomes very apparent. So those are different things. Don't get... I tell you what, this almost became an exercise in futility for me. Because when you see this passage and you want to... If you're going to do any work on it, just outside of yourself and go look... Everybody is standing up today. I guarantee you 98 or 99% of the preachers that preached on this part of the Sermon on the Mount today, you're the salt of the earth and you're the light of the world, was applying it to their congregations and telling them they were the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And you're not. You're something else. But Israel was supposed to be that, and that was the impact they were supposed to make. And I just wanted to clear that up because God has a plan for them to be that, but He also has a plan for us. And it's not, and the whole idea here is not today. Let's just do a bunch of good works, and people will see that, and then they'll obviously know about our faith. That's not how that works. We're going to have to articulate that today. That's why Paul's gospel, he calls it was the mystery of the gospel. We just read that a moment ago. It was the mystery of the gospel. You know what that means? Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about it. And they won't know today either unless we tell them about it. Okay, so now let me pick up in the notes to where we are. And that is last week, you remember I told you the story about the first time I ever witnessed to anybody? And I was kind of nervous about it. And I got my New Testament out, and it was really difficult for me to find the book of Romans because I was so nervous, and I was trying to think about what's the first thing I'm supposed to say, and I was mentally distracted and all that. And what would have really been good, of course, if I had practiced that presentation before I actually got out of the car that time. So we're going to do that. We're going to learn some things. We're going to practice them as we go along so that you'll see that it is really easy. But I wasn't a total idiot, only partial. Because I did do some things that I thought were necessary. So I wasn't totally unprepared. I want to tell you what I did, and I want you to look up at the board. I know for you folks on Zoom, I apologize that this is small. This may be small for the folks in this room. Okay, Ruby's looking at. Can you read any of that? Sarita, can you read any of that? All right, I apologize to everybody then, because evidently that's way too small. But what I wanted to say is, consider this to be a page in my New Testament. Okay? And what I did is, back then when I used a version of the Roman Road plan of salvation. And that means that the first verse that I would have anybody turn to was Romans chapter 3, verse 23. And I just scribbled these. This is the verses that are on my New Testament page. But this is the verse that I wanted right here, verse 23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And here's what I wrote down in my New Testament. And I would encourage you to mark down the plan of salvation in a New Testament. Now let us get all the way through it so that you see it, and then you can write it down the way you're comfortable with it. But I would encourage you to get a New Testament, and because you know what? It's just really easy to carry, and it's not as intimidating as, bringing out a big Bible, and, people kind of recoil a little bit sometimes. So here's what I would do. Again, this first verse that I was going to turn to, I wrote at the top of the page what the point was that I was trying to make by reading that verse. And the point I was making here is that we are all sinners. That's the only point I was trying to make out of that. And I would just say the Bible says that we're all sinners. And then I would read the verse, and sometimes I'd have them read part of it with me. I'd go, and you know what? And if you're witnessing to somebody like that, it's really good to sit beside them. So I'm going to walk off camera just for a second, but I'm going to come back up, and I'll get Adam to help me. Can you bring your chair and come up on the platform? I didn't rehearse this with him. I should have. Okay, so let's do it. Let's do it right here. Can you see Adam? Is Adam in the frame? No. He's not. All right, come over this way. All right, so here's what we would do. So if he's sitting down there, what I would do, no matter where I was sitting in the room before, I would get up and come over and sit and show him. See, I'm going to hold this New Testament out, and I'm going to show it to him. And I hate to sit down. I feel like I disappeared. Yeah. Okay. So let me turn over here, Romans 3. So I would go right here. I go, see, Romans 3:23 says, for how many have sinned? All. See, I'm getting him to say it. All. And just stay right there. Okay. That makes people so nervous. I love it. Okay. Really, I don't want to do that to Adam because, okay, but anyway, I'm going to use you again. So if you'll sit right there. Okay. So get him to say it with you, for all of sin. And I would say, even if I didn't really know this person, I would say, because of what the Bible says, you already know I'm a sinner. I'm doing myself first, right? And I say, and even though I don't really know anything about you, because I know what the Bible says, I know that you're a sinner too. Nobody is perfect. When you say it that way, people, they get that. Why? Because that's what people say all the time. Nobody's perfect. And so if you're not then you're a sinner, right? And so what I did on my New Testament was I circled it so you could see it. But what I did is I underlined the verse in my New Testament. At the top of the page, I write the point that I'm trying to get across, that we're all sinners. And then down at the bottom of the page, I'm going to give the transition statement that takes me from my first verse to my second verse, so that it doesn't look like my conversation is choppy and we're just changing subjects and people can't keep up. You need to be able to, this word we use now, segue into the next point. But I just call it a transition statement. It takes what you just saw and it makes a natural connection to the next point. And then at the very bottom of the page, I wrote the next place I'm going, which in that plan that was marked in my New Testament was Romans 6:23. So the first verse I turned to was, for all have sinned. I used to say it like this, and I'm not suggesting that you do it this way, because but I used to say it like this. In order for you to understand enough to be saved, the Bible's going to present four things, and you need to know these four things. And I'll go, here's the first thing. Everybody is a sinner, and that includes me and you. You don't know me, but you know, because what the Bible says, that I'm a sinner. Let me show you right here in Romans 3:23. That's what I do. I'd sit down beside Adam. I'd get him to say, how many does the Bible say have sinned? All. And I'd say that all is everybody. And everybody that we see all day long, we know they're not perfect either. So I'm a sinner and you're a sinner. And then I would ask him, Adam, are you a sinner? Yes. See, if you've ever committed one sin, guess what that makes you? Makes you a sinner. That doesn't mean you're trying to sin every way you can. People get this idea, oh, I'm not a sinner because I try to be a good person. If you're not perfect, there's only, look, in the world there's only two flavors of people. Perfect people and sinners. Now, you may say, oh, but what's different about the sinners? Maybe the degree, but we're going to talk about that too. So I'm going to sit down now. I'm just trying to show you what we're doing here so you'll have an idea when we go through. So after I show him that, then the next thing I would do is I'd have it written down 623, and I'd turn over, I'd say, now the second thing you need to know is here in Romans 6:23. And that verse starts off with, the wages of sin is death. Now, I'm using the old way that I used to do that. I think it can work. I've certainly worked it lots of times. I mean, thousands of times. But you may not want to use that one. You may want to go back to earlier in the book of Romans where it talks about God judging all unrighteousness of men. You can do your own verse. That's why I'm saying don't mark in your Bible yet. See how you want to do this. But there's lots of verses that you could use to do that. And so, anyway, I know where I'm going. When I get to Romans 6:23, guess what? In Romans 6:23, that verse is underlined. So I know exactly on the page where my eyes are going. And then at the top, I'm going to write the point that I'm trying to make when I'm reading Romans 6:23 to Adam. And then at the bottom of the page, I'm going to give my next transition statement, and then the next verse I'm going to, which in those days was Romans 5:8. But God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And then I would do little things like I say, you could put that on one hand. Christ died for our sins. So we had a problem with sin. We all have that problem. There's a consequence because of our sin. And now God has made a provision for that sin. And that's his Son. Okay, so so even though I had not practiced going through the plan, I had written all of that out in my New Testament. The good thing is, once I finally found the book of Romans and remembered I'm starting in chapter 3, then I had notes that guided me the rest of the way. Okay, will you take your chair and go back? Okay, all right, thank you. All right. Hey, thanks, Adam. Okay. I may use you again. Okay, all right. That'll teach them to come in, won't it? Yeah. I'm so glad they did. Okay. So I'm up front, what I'm trying to do is say there is an easy way for you to do this. Once you get that marked in your Bible, then the thing to do is to practice starting to go through that and just say it. But to get there, you have to get the conversation there, right? And so I'm going to give you some transition statements that will get you from a regular conversation into a conversation where you can start to present the gospel. And so some of these are listed in your notes. So once you've got that outline marked in your Bible, once you've got it kind of committed to memory, and look, once you've done it and done it and done it and done it, you can do just like I used to do. Romans 3:23, Romans 6:23, Romans 5:8. And back then, I used to use that Romans 10:13, for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. I would not suggest doing that, because actually something else happened over there in Romans 10 with regard to what Paul's talking about the Jewish people. But it doesn't matter what the verses are. We'll cover those. I'm going to lay out a plan that I think would be good for us. I'm just trying to say that once you get that down and you've really gotten familiar with it, you'll be able to recall that from memory anytime, anywhere. I've told you that story before about when I was in elementary school and we were learning those times tables and we'd gotten up to 9s. And I remember my teacher saying, I want you to know your 9, it went up to 9 times 9. She said, I want you to know your 9s table so well that I could come to your house in the middle of the night, wake you up out of a dead sleep, and say to you, what is 9 times 9? And you would go 81. And when she said that, here's what I thought. Nobody can do that. That is just totally impossible. I don't even know why you're talking about it like that. To me, that was really out of reach. But I just didn't understand, right? I just didn't understand. You may be sitting there thinking, I want to be able to come to your house, wake you up in the middle of the night, and say to you, give me the verses for your presentation of the gospel, and you'll go, and you're thinking, that's impossible. Nobody can do that. You may be thinking, oh, some people can do it, but I can't. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. As easy as if I were to wake you up and go, what's your name? Now, if I wake you up and go, what's your name? And, and you go, I don't know. Okay, we have other issues. But you'll be able to do this, okay? And we'll get familiar with it so that you don't get uptight about it. All you're doing is being a faithful ambassador. And there's a message that you'll be able to articulate about that. Okay. So the first thing that you need is something that will change the conversation that you're having over into the spiritual area. And so there's a number of ways to do that. I've given you some of these, and I'm going to put them up on the PowerPoint. So here's the first one. Do you attend church anywhere? Now you say, oh, that's a bad one, because what if they say no? I'm going to show you exactly what to say when they say no. Now, if they say yes, you know what? Your job just got easier, didn't it? Because these folks are already attending church, and because they're attending church, they may well already know the Lord. But they're certainly not going to be offended about you talking about Him. So, there you go. So, if it's a yes, it's easy. It's easy. By the way, I will show you what to do if they say yes. But if they say no, in fact, let me just run through all of these for a moment. We'll kind of take them individually. The second question you could ask is, do you consider yourself to be a spiritual person? See, it just kind of depends on what the conversation is doing. If someone says, if Adam and I are talking, and he's going to witness to me, and I happen to say, yeah, you know what, we wanted to do such and such on Sunday, but we can't do that on Sunday. And that might be a perfect opening to say, oh, do you guys go to church somewhere? See, but if you don't want to use that one, or you get the idea, no, that's not that, then use the second one. Just say, hey, do you consider yourself to be a spiritual person? Now, I know that's pretty vague, but it's meant to be vague. And then, now listen, whenever you ask these questions, do not debate it with them. Let them talk to you. Because that gives you information to know where they're really at and what they're really thinking. So don't get into do you consider yourself a spiritual person? Yeah, I asked God to make it rain, and you know what? And it rained for 45 minutes out at the house the other day. And then don't go, God didn't do that. No, now you're off track. Now you're off track. Don't even worry about that. Just listen to what it is, and you'll get an idea. Here's the third one. Do you sometimes think about spiritual things? Now, if they say yes, now, you know what? Let them tell you a little about that. You're not going to have a big, long conversation about that. All you're doing is turning the conversation because you have a couple of questions you want to ask. And that's what you're trying to get to. Here's the fourth one, and that is, do you ever read the Bible? Now, when would that come in handy? When could you use that one? If in the course of your conversation someone goes, well, I love to read, you could just go, oh, do you ever read the Bible? Or if they talk about something they read the other day or something like that. I'm just saying, these are not the only statements you can use, but I've given you 4 here. And I have to tell you, all the conversations I ever had with folks when I was going to present the gospel, I've never had to stray outside of these 4 very much at all. If I did, it was only because they gave me a perfect setup to ask a little bit of a different question. and it just was, it was just, I couldn't resist it. So it's not like you have to memorize a bunch of stuff. So these are questions that kind of turn the conversation in that way. And by the way, you said, well, what if they say no? What if I say, do you sometimes think about spiritual things? And they say, no, I don't. Or if they say, no, I don't attend church. Or, no, I don't consider myself to be a spiritual person. Or, no, I don't ever read the Bible. And you know what the answer to all of those? The answer to all of those is the same. You're not, what? Adam, did he go home? I'm going to use him again. Okay. So, all right. So, I'm just picking on Adam. He's not even here to enjoy it. All right. So, I would say that I'd say the same thing to every one of those. You're not alone. There's a lot of people that don't read the Bible. There's a lot of people that don't think about spiritual things. There's a lot of people that don't go to church anywhere. And now I'm going to ask this question. Why do you think that is? And again, don't debate it. Don't argue with them. Well, and by the way, that is a good question, isn't it? Why a lot of people don't go to church anymore. Why do you think that is? I saw a book title one time. I thought the title was great, and it was Why Nobody Goes to Church Anymore. Or maybe it was Why Nobody Gets Anything Out of Church Anymore. It was one of those two. I can't remember exactly. And I thought that was such a great title. So you know what I did? I got the book, but instead of reading it, I thought about that and wrote down what I thought was going to be in the book ahead of time. And when I opened up the book, it was the horriblest book I ever read in my life. Had nothing to do with the title whatsoever. It was completely bogus. The only thing I got out of that was a title that I created a sermon out of that I thought was fairly decent, but the book was absolutely worthless. I don't know what happened to the guy. He had a great title and then nothing. Okay, so why did you need to know that? I'm not sure. Okay, so anyway, these are the things that kind of get the conversation going. And if they say yes, you're to these, yeah, I do read the Bible. Oh, tell me about that. And when they tell you, you might say, so you have read about God's provision for sin. So you have read about, there's a number of things you can say right there. I'm going to give you all of this when we get to it. But if they say no to those, it's the same answer. What's the answer? Somebody give me the answer. No, somebody on Zoom, give me the answer. You've just asked the question, do you attend church anywhere? And you're witnessing to me, and I go, no, I don't go to church. Somebody on Zoom, give me the answer. Not all at once.
You notice it happens to a lot of people these days. Why do you think that is?
Okay. All right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the next.
Yeah. A lot of people. That's true for a lot of people these days. Why do you think it is that people don't go to church? Let them give you those reasons. Because no matter which of these questions you ask, and no matter what they say to you, you are now going to give your answer. I gave you 3 examples in your books. They're not the only 3. I could probably think of 30, and you could too. But I want to go through these 3, and I mention these 3 for a reason. Number 1. So reason, do you see where we are at reason number 1? So reason number 1. So you can, when they give you the reason, I'll tell you why people don't go to church anymore. Because Sunday's their only day to sleep late. Okay. And I go, I think there's some other reasons why people don't. Let me tell you what I think. And then, depending on who I'm talking to and how the conversation's going, I might pick one of these 3. I might pick something completely different. But let's just read number 1. One of the reasons has to do with Satan's effort to bring the whole world to a rejection of God. to create ungodliness in this world. And for God to not be a part. Now, I'm ad-libbing now because I'm not looking right at those notes. But you get the notes just have the idea there. That Satan would rather have a world in which no one is thinking about God, nobody's really talking about God, that our whole lives get wrapped up in the things of this world, because he wants to do that. Now, notice in the notes that I've given you, notice the last part of this. And that is dangerous, because one day God is going to bring his wrath upon those who reject him and his offer of forgiveness. You know what you just did? You just moved into a gospel presentation. There's no need to do anything else. As soon as you said that, you know what? Remember that? Remember those points we talked about? Wrath consciousness. That's what I just said at the end of that statement. Does Satan really want to bring about a godless world? Is he working to do that? Of course he is. And so all I did was find a way to move in to the gospel presentation and talk about wrath consciousness. I can back up from there and go, and the wrath will be upon everyone, because everyone is a sinner. And now, we're right back there. And off you go in your gospel presentation. And you can move all the way through that gospel presentation. Here's the second one. Reason number 2. I can understand that people are often put off by religion. But what I'm talking about is the most important decision you'll ever make in your entire life. A decision that will not only affect you every day for the rest of your life, but it will continue to affect you throughout eternity. I know that may sound odd. That's something you decide in your lifetime will affect you after you're dead, but it's true, because God created you to be an eternal being. Now, the reason that I give you that one is because I have put together a presentation of the gospel called The Most Important Decision You Will Ever Make. At that point, you could either play that for them on your phone and let them hear that gospel presentation, or you could give that presentation yourself. Once you hear it, it's not long, and once you hear it, you might go, hey, I can do that, and I can do it better than Mike can. Probably can. But you know what? There's the opportunity to do that. This one is a little different. This one is trying to create a little curiosity. The other one is actually making a statement. Here's the third one. Men are sinners, and it makes them feel guilty and therefore uncomfortable if they think very much about God or the Bible. Therefore, they prefer to leave God out of their life. Now, you can just say, that's not true for every single person that doesn't read the Bible or doesn't think about spiritual things. But it is true for a lot of people. Talking about God and talking about the Bible is very incompatible with their lifestyle. And so they would rather just leave those things alone and not talk about them. And when you get to there, it's a natural, and you know what you've already done? You've already established the first point. Why are they uncomfortable? Because everyone is a sinner. And now you're back in the gospel presentation, and off you go again. So those are easy ways to transition into a spiritual conversation. And then you're going to ask them a question. If they say, no, I don't do those things, instead of just going, oh, and then wondering where you go from there, you're going to go, do you consider yourself to be a spiritual? No, I don't think about spiritual things at all. That's interesting that you'd say that. There's a lot of people that feel that way. Why do you think that is? Or is it because you really need to know that answer? Not really. But their answer does tell you something about them. And the more experienced you get with giving the gospel, sometimes the more you'll be able to kind of customize your presentation to really say something that they will be more interested in hearing than just a rote repetition of a gospel presentation. But here's what I know. Whatever they do say, even if it doesn't give me a great opening or opportunity, I'm going to get that opportunity when I say, you know what, I've thought about this, and here's what I think. No. We have to keep going. So this is, so there's three of those. I'm sure there's three better ones. They're just the ones that I just came up with off the top of my head as I putting these notes together. We could do a bunch of others, but you understand what you're doing here is you're just moving from their answer into a gospel presentation. Now, I talked to you about what to do if they say yes, right? That you're going to, let's suppose they say, yeah, I do go to church. What's the next question? Yeah, where do you go to church? And then and then they will tell you, like, I go to the Church of the Pomeranians. Okay, great. What's the next question you might ask to continue that conversation, or the statement that you might make? Yeah, how long you been going? Tell me a little bit about you Pomeranians. What do y'all believe? Yeah, I mean, so everybody brings their dog. Okay, so anyway, I'm just being funny. Evidently not too. Okay, but soon, when you're having this conversation, you're going to get to where you're going to use a lead-in statement or a lead-in question, because, see, now they've answered yes. So I told you what to do if they say no. It's the same answer for everybody. Somebody on Zoom besides Eric, give me the answer to the question. You're witnessing to me and you say, hey, Mike, do you attend church anywhere? And I go, nope, I don't go to church. Somebody on Zoom, give me the answer for that.
Why don't you go to church?
Why don't you go to church? Okay. All right. So let me see if I can come up with an answer. I don't go to church because there's hypocrites in church. That's a little bit unfair because we haven't covered those kinds of objections. Because there's hypocrites in church. I think there's hypocrites. That's fine. No matter what I say. Because, see, you might want to get defensive right there and go, dude, hypocrites go to the grocery store too. Do you quit buying groceries? Hypocrites buy gasoline. Are you going to not buy gas? Don't get defensive. Don't debate it, and don't argue it. What is the answer to that? When I say, I think it's because there's hypocrites in the church. I don't want to go to church with a bunch of hypocrites. What is your next statement? You don't have to give me which of the reasons. Give me the statement that transitions you into giving a reason. Okay, a lot of people feel that way. That's true. Now that's the question of, why do you think that is? But then when I go, okay, well, I think it's that way because I don't go to church because there's hypocrites. Now, what is your next transition statement? Huh? Oh, okay. Is Anna the bravest one in here? What is wrong with y'all? Okay. She said that we're all sinners. That's true, but that's not the transition statement I'm looking for. What's the transition statement I'm looking for? All right, let me put it up on the board. This is why we're going through this. Because if we don't, you'll get out of sequence and then you'll get lost. Right? This is how we do it. So the first one is turn the conversation to the spiritual. And let's just use that first question, do you go to church anywhere? Okay? So that the next thing is then you're going to ask a question. But if they've given you some other information, you may use a different question that you think would be something they'd more likely to have a conversation with you about. So you ask the question, okay? If they say yes, I do go to church, then you want to continue the conversation. Yeah, I go to the Church of the Pomeranians. Great. Tell me a little bit about that. And then you can turn right around and go, You know, a lot of people don't go to church anymore. Why do you think that is? You know, I don't know. I think people just, got out of the habit of that or whatever. And now you're right where you want to be. And you can say, you know what? I thought about this, and here's what I think. And now you're going to give a reason that puts you right into a gospel presentation. Now, I'm going to give you a caveat to that later, because you say, well, gosh, if they're already going to church, maybe they're already saved. They are, but we haven't covered that question yet. So, but if you say yes, all right, you continue the conversation. If they say no, no matter what question it is you ask them, then you make the statement. A lot of people feel that way. Why do you think that is? That's what someone said a while ago when I said, no, I don't go to church. He goes, why not? Which kind of made me feel like I was on the spot. But I'm thinking about going Sunday. Okay. So you're just trying to get to that statement, right? Now that you're in the spiritual conversation, you need that lead-in question. That's where we're getting stuck right there. And so, yeah, I go to the Church of the Pomeranians, and tell me a little about that. And then, everybody with me so far? Okay. And then you're going to ask another question. And these are in your notes. Okay, I'm just panicking a little bit because the buzzer went off. Yeah, and that's what this next question is. Yeah. You want to have a little bit of a conversation about it. It's not like this. Like, if let me show you how. Can you come back up? Okay. You can just stand up here. We'll just stand and do this. So you do want to have some interest in folks. So here's Adam, and I'm going to witness to him. And so I'm going to give you your line, okay? So when I say, do you think, do you ever go to church? And you're going to go say yes. Then we'll have a conversation for a moment, and then I'll transition. Here's the two brief. So, Adam, do you, pay no attention to that. Do you go to church anywhere? Where do you go? Okay, good. Look, if you died today, do you know where you spend eternity? See, that's too quick, right? I gotta go. Yeah, he's got to go. So if I go, he goes, I go to the Pomeranian church. Great, tell me a little about that. What do y'all do there? Okay, good. Okay, I pretty much got my answer at that point about his faith in Christ, right? He said sacrifice. Those of you who don't have the microphone, he said sacrifice chickens. Okay, so that kind of tells me, But suppose your line is we study the Bible. Oh, okay, great. Now don't get defensive there and go, yeah, which translation? Okay, see, okay, there we go. See, now you're off track. So this is, and I could say, I could turn around and pull him back over. But look, this is the question. What did you just? He's going to give you a microphone. Thank you, Mark. That is great. Okay. So now we've done the transition. We turn the conversation to the spiritual. We've used a question about, do you go to church? Do you read the Bible? Any of those kinds of things. He gives me a reply, and now I do. Clifford's right. Now I want to find out if the guy really knows the Lord. Now, I'm going to give you several of these ways to ask this next question. And depending on how your conversation is going, you will pick the one that you think is most appropriate, okay? That first one, if you look in your notes, is, if you were to die today, do you know for sure where you would spend eternity? Now, I really do like that one. And you can ask that in a very kind way, because you know what? If he says, yeah, we go to the Church of the Pomeranians, and I go, what do y'all do there? And he says, we study the Bible. And I go, man, that's wonderful. So you know what it takes to get to heaven. Yeah, and now you want to do that. Or let me just ask you a different way. If you were to die today, do you know for sure where you would go and spend eternity? Okay, before he answers, let me tell you, not everybody that goes to church answers that question yes. Because they have no security. That they don't know for sure that they're saved. They go to church, they're trying to be a good person. They may have even trusted Christ as their Savior, but they don't, but they're still in question about it. I mean, you know what? The security issue of it. No, because you know why? There's too many preachers out there talking about you losing your salvation. And maybe they're under one of those influences. And so I kind of want to find that out. And so I say, so Adam, if you were to die today, do you know for sure where you'd go to spend eternity? Okay. Okay, now he's going to play hardball with me. Okay. Okay. All right. So go ahead and sit. Let me get you back in a minute. So if he says yes, what's the next question for him? He did say yes. What's the next question? Yes. How do you know? How do you know? And that's the answer that tells you if he's saved or not. Because, so Clifford, let's you and me role play it. You can turn on your microphone right here. So you're asking me, just ask me, do you know for sure if you die today where you're going to spend eternity?
Do you know for sure if you died today where you're going to spend eternity?
I do. I'd go to heaven.
That means you're saved then.
No, don't say that. You got one more question.
No?
No,
What?
you got one more question. How do you know?
How do you know?
How do you know? Yeah, because I got baptized. What do you now know?
You're
What do
not
you know?
saved.
That didn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he probably won't. So, all right. So let's role play it again. I'm going to give you a different answer. Okay. So ask me.
Okay, how do you know?
No. Back up a question. If you died today.
If you died today, do you know where you'd spend eternity?
Yeah, I'd go to heaven.
Okay, and how do you know that?
Because I joined the church. What does that tell you?
The Pomeranian church?
Okay, I don't know. Could have been the Dachshund church. What does that tell you? It means that I may not really understand the gospel, right? Mm-hmm. Let's do it again. So give me that if you died today question.
Okay, if you died today, do you know where you're going to spend eternity?
Yeah, I'd go to heaven.
And how do you know that?
I trusted Christ as my Savior when I was 15 years old.
Sounds like I'll see you in heaven.
So, okay, see, that's the answer that you're looking for, right? But I try to be a good person. My daddy's a preacher. I got baptized. I joined the church. Let's do it one more time. I'll give you one that I have heard a lot. So ask me where would you go if you died?
Okay, if you die today, do you know where you spend eternity?
Yeah, I'd go to heaven.
And how do you know this?
Because I ask God to save me every night.
I'm sure that'll work.
Okay. Don't say that. Okay. So I ask God to save me every night. If you're asking God to save you every night, are you trusting what Christ did? No, you're not. So, see, all of these are indicated. There's where that's the goal, is to get to this question. The first question, let's just do, if you died today, do you know for sure? That I want you to include that phrase. I want you to know, do you know for sure? Because some folks go, well, I hope I'm going.
Well,
but if they're not sure, you want to give them the gospel.
What if they tell you, well, yeah, they're sure because they've been whatever, they've some form of works.
Yeah, well, that's where your next question comes in. Your next question is,
like they say they've been baptized.
Uh-huh.
And they're adamant about it. Well, yeah, that's what saved you.
And then I guess the next thing, now you have a couple of answers. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves because now we're getting into objections about it. But if someone was to say, yeah, I know for sure where I go, well, where would you go? I'd go to heaven. How do you know? Well, because I got baptized. And I'd say, you do realize that baptism won't save you. You could say it that way. Or you could say, the Bible says there are 3 things that you need to understand in order to go to heaven. Can I show you what those are? Because really all you're after is to give them the gospel presentation. You don't even have to refute the baptism thing. Because when they're through with this gospel presentation, they're going to understand that it is faith alone in Christ alone. And there's nothing they can do. I do have those verses like Titus 3:5. If someone says to me, yeah, I joined the church, I sing in the choir, I got baptized, and I would say, that's interesting that you would say that, considering that Titus 3:5 says, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us. So the Bible says there's nothing we can do to save ourselves. There's no good act we can perform. And so you've got a verse. If I feel like somebody is really aggressive about it, and I go, what verse are you looking at that's told you that? Do you know how many people can actually call up a verse that talks about what it is they believe when they believe the wrong thing? Not very many. Not very many. Okay, so kind of getting off, except to say, I got us to this point. We didn't get as far as I wanted to get because I got 8 of these, and I got 8 answers that they can give you. I guess what we'll do is we'll wait, and we'll do these in next week in the next session. But what I want to do is I want to come back, and now I want to talk to you about where we've gotten in the presentation up to this point. And I want to make sure that everybody understands it. Now, that little bit of role play that I just did with Clifford, you know what he just did? He just got through asking that question, if you died today, do you know for sure where you'd spend eternity? He probably asked me that question 5 times. And then no matter what answer I gave him, he came back with the right second question and said, how do you know? If you're not familiar with that, your conversation will just go all over the place and it'll be different every time. What you need is something that you're familiar with where you can guide that conversation so you can get that plan of salvation out in front of them. It's their decision. You can't manipulate anyone to be saved. You can't trick them into being saved. You can't force them into being saved. But what you do want is to be able to control the presentation of the gospel so that they can hear how to be saved. That's what you're after. You're just trying to give them the best opportunity to say yes or no to God's offer of forgiveness. And so that's what we're after. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back. And you folks on Zoom, you're fixing to get very involved in this. And everybody here is going to get involved in it as well, because I want you to have this down. Now, look, if you're already winning folks to Christ and you have something that's already marked out in your New Testament and you're already using that, and I'm not trying to change your presentation, but most folks don't have that, and so we're going to work through this so that we really can become confident ambassadors with this word of reconciliation. Okay, we'll see you in a minute.